right. So as people are trickling in, I just want to welcome you guys. My name is Sho Kuwamoto. I'm Vice President of Product for the Figma editor, and welcome to Framework by Figma. I've been working with the design systems community for a long time, and it's been really exciting to see how the community has grown. It started out as sort of a smaller kind of movement, and over the years, design systems have gotten more powerful, more flexible, more sophisticated. And, as that complexity has grown, they've also gotten hard to manage. Now, over the years, as those design systems have gotten more sophisticated, people have been asking us for features to help them with that sophistication. So, for example, we added variants and we added properties and we added variables. And so those are all in response to the things that you were telling us about what you needed to help you manage your design system. But then this year, one thing that we've been noticing is that people have been asking us about helping them to get their design systems adopted on their team. So they'll tell us, our design systems are actually working okay, but it's still really hard to make sure that they're adopted by everyone. So that's the theme of today's event, is we're here to help you get your design systems adopted. We're going to make a couple of feature announcements today, and the first feature that I want to talk about has to do with the intersection between design and code. So as you know, designers and developers can hang out in Figma and collaborate, and developers can look at designs and get, the properties that they need to implement their designs and so on. But, we could be doing more. One of the things that we hear a lot is that, especially for design systems that are still in the process of being rolled out and adopted, a lot of times what developers will do is they'll go into a design, they'll click on, let's say, like a tooltip, they'll see some values like corner radiuses and stroke values and so on. And they won't even know, should I be using a design system component that's already been implemented? Should I implement my own, et cetera? And so there's a lot of confusion around that. And sometimes the fact that we show these values almost gets in the way of people doing the right thing. But of course, it's hard for Figma to know what to do because we don't really know what your design systems code looks like. So some of the folks in our team came up with a new feature, which we're calling Code Connect, which is a way for Figma to learn about how your design system code is structured. So Emil, who's on the development tools team, he's going to tell you all about it. But essentially, what it allows you to do is that once you've used Code Connect, your developers can click on things, and instead of seeing just raw values, they're going to see the actual design systems code that's needed to implement that particular component. So now when you click on a button, you'll see the code for the button directly from your design system. And Emil's going to tell you all about that. Now, the second thing I want to talk about, which I'm sure you were waiting for, is we're finally releasing typographic variables. And typographic variables are obviously super important. The main thing that I think about is, we all know that it's important to use something like design tokens in order to centralize how you manage everything in your design system from the design side to the coding side. But until now, it was hard to make the leap to fully implement design tokens in Figma because we only represented, colors and strings and so on. And people needed typography variables in order to really make the leap. And so, some people have already started making that transition, but other people were waiting until we had typographic variables. And so pleased to announce they're finally here. Typographic variables are going to be available starting today. And, just to talk a little bit about why it took a little longer than we thought it would, it turns out that the world of fonts is incredibly rich. It has a lot of history. There's a lot of quirks. We would talk to experts about font experts and design system experts about, well, if you specify a font family, what does that really mean in terms of which font you should be picking? And then people would say, well, it's kind of complicated. Do you have 30 minutes to sit down and talk about it? Or even something simple like, hey, I have a font weight that's medium or light. What does that mean? And people would say, well, that's complicated. So we had to work through a lot of complications to make sure that everything worked the way that it was supposed to. So it took a little bit longer, but I appreciate your patience with us. And so now typographic variables are finally here. In addition to typographic variables, we're also releasing variables for gradients. So now you can use color variables in your gradients. And there's a lot to learn about how type variables work and how gradient variables work. And Shayna is going to be explaining that momentarily. So there's a third feature that we want to announce today, and this has to do with large companies. So what we found is that in order for design systems to really be adopted, one of the most important things was to measure how adoption was going. And we have a feature today called Library Analytics, which helps with that. But with the largest customers that we have, the enterprise customers, we were finding that the Library Analytics feature just wasn't working well for them. And so we worked with them to figure out what would work for them. And ultimately, we realized that the most important thing was, or the best thing that we could do for them, was to actually let them use their own analytics system with our data. So we've developed something called the Library Analytics API, which allows enterprise customers to export the data from the library analytics inside of Figma into their system of choice, so that then they could use that to analyze the data in all sorts of more sophisticated ways, or to combine it with data they already have. So that's available as a beta starting today for enterprise customers. So those are the three things that we're releasing today to help you drive adoption of your design systems. And you're going to hear a little bit more in detail about Code Connect and the variables features, starting with Emil, who's going to talk to you about Code Connect.
Okay, hi everybody, and yeah, thanks Joe for the introduction. My name is Emil, and I'm here to talk to you about some exciting additions to DevMed, which we believe will help you achieve more consistent adoption of your design systems across both design and code. So last year at Config, we launched DevMed, and earlier this year it came out of beta. We know handoff isn't just a single moment in time, but rather a collaborative process between two disciplines that can be a real challenge for many teams. Our goal with DevMed is to build a product that really helps bring design and dev closer together. And since launching, it's been amazing to see how teams are using DevMed to help navigate this process and bring designs to life in code, as well as into the hands of their users. Design systems play a big role in helping establish a shared language between design and engineering, which is why it's been a big focus for DevMed. We want to make it easier for designers and developers to have a common language so that it's clear when someone is talking about a component or variable in the design that they're also talking about that same thing in code. And so far in DevMed, we've shipped code snippets that use your variables instead of raw hex codes or pixel values, a component playground to help developers see all the details and configurations of a component, the ability to see when an instance has been detached, and even compare that to the original design to see all the differences. And finally, we ship a plugin platform for teams to be able to build their own tools so they can have full control over the code being generated from within DevMed. On the topic of plugins, it's been amazing to see what the community has created. From CodeGen plugins such as Anima, to integrations with external tools like Linear, as well as private plugins powering internal workflows as companies such as Atlassian. Plugins can really superpower the way teams work by incorporating your specific workflows into DevMed. And we're super excited to see where you take this platform next. Since the launch of DevMed, we've learned that one of the most common use cases for plugins has really been to surface more design system code and information within Figma. I wanted to take some time to unpack why that's so important to teams and what problems they're looking to solve with these kinds of plugins. So today, when you inspect a component or instance in Figma, we surface generic code snippets with some basic styling code, for example, CSS. This information can be super useful if you're a UI engineer implementing a brand new component or screen. But in the case when a component already exists in code in your design system, then seeing that CSS might actually cause more harm than good. First, it may not be immediately clear that code already exists for a given component. So a developer who's less familiar with the design system may actually be inclined to start writing new code instead of reusing components that already exist. Secondly, even if you know that the component exists in code, it can still be very tedious to implement. First, you need to find the component in your code documentation, followed by a lot of tab switching back and forth to cross-reference the designs in the documentation, ensuring you've configured your component in code with the right properties so it looks like the design in Figma. This is both time-consuming and error-prone. And honestly, as a developer, I sometimes just find it more fun to write new code rather than spend hours reading through a bunch of documentation. In the end, the result is the same. Developers will write new code, duplicating the hard work you've already put into your design system, instead of using the existing design system components. This means more code needs to be maintained, and the UI likely won't match what the designs require from both a look and feel perspective, as well as accessibility. Your products risk having overall lower quality, inconsistent user experiences across surfaces, and taking longer time to build and reach customers. We know many of you spend a ton of time trying to drive the adoption of your design system through education within your organizations, driving towards the goal of improving the overall product quality and experience of your end users. But this can be a real challenge. As you probably already know, education can only go so far, and it needs to be constantly reinforced. While CodeGen plugins can be a great solve for some teams, not every organization has the resources or bandwidth to build and maintain their own tools and infrastructure. So we asked ourselves what Figma can do to help. And as Sho mentioned earlier, the team has been working on something really exciting that I'm excited to share you now. Today, I'm thrilled to tell you more about a new dev mode capability we're calling Code Connect. We believe Code Connect will help solve some of these design system adoption challenges I spoke to earlier. So what's Code Connect? Well, Code Connect enables you to surface dynamic code snippets for your design system right within dev mode. There's no generated code, no AI guessing what code to write, but rather code that you, as a design system team, have checked, validated, and want engineers to write every single day. This enables you to push code samples and best practices directly in front of your entire engineering team. So let's take a look at how handing off a design looks today versus what it could look like with Code Connect. Today, the experience often looks like this. A developer selects a component or an instance within Figma to inspect. They then need to figure out if this component even exists in code or not. And if they're unfamiliar with the system, let's say they're new to your company, then they might not know, and oftentimes will just assume it doesn't exist. But if they do think it exists, previous slide, please. If they do think that it exists, then they'll need to find this component in a separate code documentation website, usually. And this is not always as easy as it sounds because the names of components in code often don't match the names in Figma. So it can be really hard to know what to search for. And once you've found that component, you still need to figure out what the right props are to get that code component configured to look the same as the design. And this, again, takes a lot of tabbing back and forth between Figma and documentation to get it to look just right. Finally, they can write the code for the component before well, they just need to do it all over again for the next component. This takes a ton of time. With Code Connect, developers simply select components or instances to inspect, and dev mode will show them the exact code they need to write to recreate that design in code, using all the components and best practices developed by your design system team. This is not only much quicker, but is also less error-prone, and ultimately makes it easier for your engineering org to adopt the design system and use code that already exists. So, how does this all work? Well, in contrast to many Figma features, Code Connect is mostly managed outside of Figma, actually directly in your code base. Here, your developers describe, using code, how components map from Figma to your code base. These descriptions are then published to Figma so that connected code snippets from your actual code base can be displayed within dev mode for others to view. When we were developing Code Connect, we heard the same concerns from every design system team we talked to. They were worried that if Code Connect lived inside of Figma, it would be difficult to maintain and keep up to date with the rapid changes they were making to code. That's why Code Connect lives in your code base. Simply use the Code Connect SDK to annotate your design system components with metadata, as well as sample usage directly in your code. Code Connect can easily be kept up to date with any changes you make to your components, and even providing type errors when sample code doesn't compile. Code Connect was built with real-world design systems in mind, so even if your components in Figma and code don't match one-to-one in terms of structure and naming, that's totally okay. With our SDK, you'll be able to describe these complex mappings, so you don't need to make any major changes to your existing libraries in code or in Figma. What you see here on screen now is actually a screenshot from Figma's own design system. We've been using Code Connect for months at this point to drive adoption of our internal design system. Once you've used the SDK to describe how your code maps to Figma components, this metadata needs to be pushed to Figma so that it can be displayed to engineers within dev mode when they select one of those components or instances of that component. You can simply use the Figma CLI to push the Code Connect information to Figma. This can be done locally on your laptop or automated within your CI/CD environment, so Code Connect is always up to date with all the latest code changes. It's important for us to also keep your code private, which is why all processing to find and parse code connections is done locally, and only the explicit code connections that you've set up are uploaded to Figma. Once your code connections have been pushed to Figma, you'll be able to see them inside of dev mode. When a component is connected, we prioritize this code snippet in the UI and deprioritize any other styling information, as well as dev mode's built-in code generation. This makes it as straightforward and easy as possible for your engineers to get the right code and follow best practices for using your design system. We're really excited for Code Connect, and we really believe this is a key step in making it easier for your teams to adopt design systems. Code Connect is available in beta starting right now and will be part of the dev mode and Figma organization and enterprise plans. Right now, Code Connect supports React with or without Storybook, as well as iOS with SwiftUI. During the beta, we'll be working to expand support to Android development, as well as adding additional functionality based on nothing else but your feedback, of course. We're also excited to support other frameworks such as Vue.js and Angular in the future, as well as much more. And finally, I'm excited to say that Code Connect is actually open source starting today. Visit the GitHub repo for Code Connect to get started using it. There's a bunch of documentation there. And later today, you'll also have the opportunity to dive into Code Connect more deeply with Jake, one of our developer advocates, as well as hear from some of our alpha customers about their experience using Code Connect. Huge thanks to them. And really, finally, I just want to say that this is just the beginning for Code Connect, and we're thrilled to learn from all of you about what you'd like to see next. So join the community on GitHub and give us your thoughts and feedback. And with that, that's all for me. So I'm going to hand it over to Shayna, who will tell you more about what's new with variables.
So I'm Shayna. I'm a product designer here at Figma, and I work on our design systems tooling and features for a bunch of features, including variables. And I'm excited today to share with you some of our latest updates. So starting off, we've got one that I know a lot of you are excited for as well, and that's typography with variables. And so starting today, in Figma, you can define string and number variables and bind them to various typographic fields. And so this includes font family, font weight, font size, and more. And so as a design systems manager, you'll have atomic control over each of these fields. And then once you have your variables defined, you can put them inside a text style and still save and publish that text style for the rest of your team to use. And so the rest of your team who wants to use your design system is already familiar using text styles, and they can continue to use them as usual. And if you're someone who's familiar with design tokens, you can think of the text style as like the composite token that includes a bundle of all these values. With each typography token, though, and each variable in the atomic fields, you can actually have more fine-grained control to maintain your system. So for example, let's say you define a certain font family to be reused throughout all your text styles. You'd create one variable for that and bind it in all your text styles. And then later, if you need to do a rebrand and change your font family, you could change it in one variable instead of changing it in like 30, 40 text styles. We're also announcing today gradients. And with this, we've introduced a new redesign of the gradient panel itself in Figma that gives you a bit more overview of seeing all your stops. And you can also type in percentage values directly. And of course, you'll be able to bind color variables to each stop as well in Figma. And so let's take a look at how each of these work in a demo. I'll head over to the product. So here in my file, let's start with an example of typographic values here. And so I'll create a text layer, type out something here. And in my variables window, let's say we do an example that would switch between like a sans serif and a serif font. So I could create a string variable, name it as something like font family, define it to evaluate to enter for my first mode, which would be my sans serif font. And then for my second mode, I can pick something else like Laura, which is a font that does have serifs. And so with my text layers, in the font family field in the text panel, I can access this variable button as long as I have some variables to pick from, apply that font family, and if I go to my mode switcher, I can now switch between those two modes, and you'll see that the value of the variable will change depending on which mode I have set. So this is a simple example. If we go to another file, we could see a setup where I've already done some work and defined a couple of variables in here. So you'll see I still have a font family variable for this one. And in this example, I've chosen to use different screen sizes as my modes. So I have desktop, tablet, mobile. And for the sake of this demo, I've picked a couple different fonts across those different modes. I've also defined different font weights in a string variable. You could also use numbers here if you'd like. And then I also have font size. So you'll see the font size gets smaller as we get to mobile. And so if I were to also start with a text string here, I could go ahead and bind that font family variable. I could also bind my font weight with this apply variable option in the menu, and font size as well. And there's more fields available too. You'll see you can apply to like line height, etc. But today we'll try these three. And once I do that, I can also save these as a style. So I can create a new text style, say this is like a headline style. And you'll see in your style that all those variables are defined as part of the definition of that headline style itself. And so across these different device frames, I actually have different modes set up. So here I've chosen tablet out of desktop, mobile, and tablet. And you'll see that as I drag this across different mode contexts, it'll actually re-render and show a different value of that variable. And so that's an example of how you could use typography variables. There will be a deep dive after this where you can see more examples and best practices. And now for gradients. So with gradients, if I draw a shape in Figma and go to my fill panel, I can navigate to my gradients tab. And here you'll see the new layout we've provided where you can still adjust your stops on the spectrum. You can now also type in numbers exactly down here if you'd like. And which each color, you can still choose a custom color, but you can also access everything from your library that are variables. So here I will pick a couple colors that are named after gradients. I can also save this as a style. Create this. And if I were working on more designs, that means that I could go ahead and apply that style I just created here. And if I select everything and go to pick a mode, switch from light to dark, you'll see now that not only do all the colors for the background and text change modes, my gradients too will be responsive to that. All right. So that's just a little taste. There's a deep dive after this, so I'll go into more. But starting today, typography and gradient variable features are going to be available on any plan you're on, and it will be live right now. So if you go ahead and refresh and create some of those variables, you should be able to try it out yourself. And now I'll pass it over to Jacob.
Hey everyone, I'm Jacob Miller, a product manager over here working on design systems. And before we head into some really incredible sessions, I want to share one more announcement and give you an overview of today's agenda. 10 months ago today, we released variables to you all. And today, with the long-awaited release of typographic and gradient variables, I am thrilled to share that variables is officially moving out of beta to general availability. Typography variables really rounds out our token offering, but I don't want you to think that this means that we're done. We'll be continuing to improve variables and making them better for all of you. With that, welcome to Framework by Figma. We really hope that you enjoy a lot of these sessions today. And with that, over to Anna.